don't know if this is a little bold for me to say, but I do think parents sometimes put their expectations onto the children. You hear many people say that the mom can understand what the baby's crying for, but nobody else can. My children have taught me how to parent. Falling down and getting hurt is just part of growing up. At some point, my eldest daughter was extremely fussy. Hi there, I'm Adhuna, and you're watching me on ParentTune. My parenting style, I think, I felt like I was an open book when I first had my first child. And I had many amazing women around me in my life at that time. And it was great to have their guidance. But eventually, between you and your child, you develop a bond and a rapport and an almost personal language that a mother and child have or create between themselves. And there's a understanding. It's, you hear many people say that the mom can understand what the baby's crying for, but nobody else can. So you do understand, this cries for food, this cries means something's wrong, this cries that she needs to go to the loo, or whatever it is. So I think there is a rapport that you build with your child as a parent. And I do really feel that my children have taught me how to parent. Like, I was answerable to their needs. And so I think I would call myself maybe a responsive parent. Little overprotective, the fear of the unknown, I suppose, trying to make sure that they didn't fall down or get hurt. Also realizing with experience that falling down and getting hurt is just part of growing up. So when to step in as a parent, I think is something that you learn on the job. And I think experience then and years of parenting gives you a sort of balance as to when you should sort of step back and allow the child to have their own experience, which is 99% of the time, by the way, and step in to help if there's real danger for toddlers and growing children. As your children grow, I think that the main thing they need to know of you as their parent is that you're there for them, come what may. In good times, in bad, when they're not sure what to do. And I think what I tried to work on was making sure that the line of communication stayed open. For me, the fact that I have good communication with my children today is what I feel is my success of parenting. So while the girls were growing up, I used to sometimes dread food time. I am not, unfortunately, one of those wonderful and amazing moms who relate to their children through food. I don't think either of my girls will ever say, "Oh, my mom taught me how to cook this." No, I do think I made up for that in other ways, but I'm hopeless in the kitchen. And I hold my hands up to that. But I am obviously very aware that it is important for the children to have a good balanced diet. And that was how I tried to teach them about food. So all the food groups, a balance of all the food groups. And that was, I think, my one-track mindedness approach to their eating habits while they were growing up. And then obviously when they reach a certain stage and phase in school, there's also that reinforcement from the school, from education about, eating a balanced and healthy diet and the food groups. And the other thing, I think, it felt important for me to try and lead by example, set the example by the food I eat myself as well. So food was a tough one at some point. My eldest daughter was extremely fussy. And now she's turned out to be somebody who thoroughly enjoys food and tries everything. The younger one was more experimental when she was younger. Then she sort of stuck to a certain balanced diet and just stuck to that one dish. So it was very hard at certain points in time to break her out of that. But I truly believe that the children were exposed to, dining out, eating meals in other people's houses, on school trips, on camps where they had to sort of try new things. And we always tried to tell them to try something new so that they would have variety, keeping this balance in mind. So one would always push back on vegetables and one would always push back on fruits. So how did I try to encourage them to have those things? I never tried to force them because I've seen that doesn't work. I don't know if this is a little bold for me to say, but I do think parents sometimes put their expectations onto the children and that makes them go in the opposite direction. It might not just be about food, it could be about anything. So this is my observation. My children are 6 years apart and the eldest is now 24. So when she was going through school, there was a big change from IGCSE to IB. It's almost as if they were an experiment. The system started to change and schools started to adopt some of the IB curriculum ideas, and she had to be flexible and move and change. The second daughter was different, and no two children are the same, and I think they have to be looked at as individuals, even though they're coming from the same kind of home background. And she decided that she completed her 10th standard in an IB system. She'd been at an age where IB, while it was quite new, it was already established in the school when she started, so she was able to follow the IB system right the way through. She had to sort of have her grades evaluated within that sort of other system. So it was just my elder daughter that did homeschooling. Unfortunately, when it came time for the younger one to apply, she didn't get into the same school as the elder one. So that was a bit of a setback for us. And I think a lot of families do face that situation. If your kids are in different schools, there are different holidays often. So how do you then, as a family, have a family holiday or any family experience? So my idea at the time the children were small was to try and make sure they're in the same school. And that was one important factor for me personally. I know people have worked, it's worked very well for certain people who have had their children, one in one school, one in another, maybe different kinds of schools, working more with, what the child has an affinity to. And that was also something that we really sort of tried to consider when choosing a school. It's funny that you say some people prefer to have a more experiential school experience for their children, and some like a book-led experience. My children were both definitely leaning towards more creativity, and while the elder daughter is a ferocious book reader, The younger one wasn't, and that was that sort of allowed me to sort of gauge what would work best for them as children going through school. In the 9th grade, the elder daughter had a very tough time in school, and we decided to do homeschooling. We did homeschooling for what was classically considered, the most crucial time, 9th, 10th, and 11th. And it was only because my daughter was so committed to it herself and wanted the change that we were able to sort of get through it. She was very self-motivated, and she managed to do all of the work with some guidance from me, and we took guidance from other people as well. But it worked out for her because of her nature. And in fact, when she then moved on to apply to universities, it helped her as a learner because she was a very self-motivated learner. So it worked really well. I asked her many times, would you have preferred we go through the system, or are you glad we did it the way we did it? And every time she says, I'm glad we did it the way we did it. So that's good. It was a big decision for all the family, and a lot of people, even in close people, didn't support us, but I felt it was right for my daughter. She was very willing to take that experience, take that challenge on, and only because of her commitment to it do I think I was able to do it. I'm not a teacher. I teach hairdressing. I don't teach maths and English, and there's a certain point in the school curriculum also where I was totally lost in many of the subjects because it's changed a lot from when I was at school. But the way we did it was we looked into all of the opportunities that were available to get the syllabus for homeschool and what she should be covering at that time. She made herself a study program, and I think that gave her a feeling of control, that it was in her hand, that it was choices that she was making. There were many times when I was panicked and worried that it wouldn't serve her for whatever reason. That's because of listening to people on the outside. But we stuck to it, and it served her well. And like I said, when she went to university, I remember sitting in the lecture that they gave for the parents on day one at the university. And one of the things that the lecturers told the students is that you need to be self-motivated. Now it's on you. It's your time to sort of put in the work. And so what she had done for the past 3 years, self-study, really prepared her for the university experience. So it really worked out well for her. She did her BA, now she's in the middle of her master's, and she's got the appetite to study more. I don't really agree with everything about the educational system. It's hard, particularly if your children are more creatively inclined. I think there are a lot of debates. I've had a lot of talks, a lot of discussions with many parents during these many years that I've been going through this school experience. The system needs to be changed. I think the IB system in some way takes a part of, the classical system and melts it a little bit with a more open schooling system, and somehow has made learning a little bit more collaborative, which is more realistic for the real world. No, we have a really, really good bond, and I know that there's a lot of sort of controversy around the fact that you shouldn't befriend your children. I don't know how I agree with that. My children feel like the closest people to me. They feel like my best friends. There are certain times when you need to be that grounding parent. There are certain times when you need to give advice. And there are certain times when you just simply need to listen. And I think a lot of people forget that good communication is a balance of not just talking, but also listening. And I learned that through my hairdressing career and having to deal with people all the time. So somebody who's a good communicator is usually a very good listener. And those are the skills that you want to pass on also to your children. So I think that's the kind of parent I was and have now evolved into being. And to be honest with you, this side of it, well, I loved bonding with my children when they were small, and I felt so rewarded by it. Not wanting to sound cheesy, but I genuinely felt that I grew as a person, learning from them and following their lead. And now today I feel really connected to my children, even though they're on the other side of the world and they're doing their lives. But if they have anything that they need consultation on, they come to us. And that's, I think, the best that I could ask for, you know, because you would hope that you've raised your children to be independent and self-sufficient, good human beings. And mine are. So that's the quandary, right? Every teenager goes through this period of change. And some people see it as rebellion. Some people see it as, bad behavior. But we've all gone through it. And it is scientifically proven that the brain, everything's going through changes, as well as hormonal changes. Your brain actually functions differently as a teenager compared to a fully fledged adult and compared to a young child. So it is for the parent, I believe, to understand that there are these biological changes happening to your child, and to empathize with that. And I think when I was first a parent, or when my parents were young parents, the kind of information and knowledge and access to things like ADHD or learning disabilities, there's a vast difference to what knowledge was available then versus what is available now. These things are normalized, they are talked about, and there are ways to manage them. Decades ago, we didn't know this. So I think that there's a lot of difference, and the information is out there about the biological and scientific changes that are happening in your child at certain stages of their life. So to make yourself aware of that, it's your job. I'm sorry. If you're not looking into that and you're putting these changes, or behaviors onto the child, it's perhaps you're not serving them in the best way that you can, I firmly believe that being a good listener and listening to your child, maybe even listening to the unsaid words, the actions, the behaviors, should help you to understand by breaking it down and looking a little deeper than just the surface as to what you could do to help. I think all teenagers go through a period where they're trying to sort of fight for their independence. There's a lot of changes, but I think this is one of the things. And parents need to allow their children to grow up at the pace they want to grow up and stop treating them as children. There's a point where you need to treat them as adults, as adult individuals with their own mind and their own opinion. And if you've brought them up to be free thinking and you've tried to empower them to have their own thoughts and go to school and learn about life, then you also have to be prepared to experience something that maybe doesn't align with how you think and how you believe. So I think you need to be open-minded as a parent. I think open-mindedness and a good listener. A very dear friend had given me a beautiful book when my first child was born. And it was called How to Talk to Your Children So They Listen to You, and How to Listen to Your Children So They Talk to You. And it was a really great read at that point in my parenting life. So the children are grown up now. My move to Goa has been after they had really flown the nest. It was a long time coming, this decision for me, and I felt like as a mom it was better to wait until they were off and doing their own lives. I have no regrets about my move. I'm very happy. I should add that the children both love the fact that we have this home here now, and they use and visit as much as they can when they're in India. I mentioned earlier that I did have a really good support system around me, some amazing women who really helped me, guided me, picked me up when I was down, and they were on my speed dial, you know. There was my mom, obviously, my sister, my best friend who had a child, my mother-in-law who was amazing, and they all had their take on it. But sometimes I didn't necessarily agree with their take on it. So to have that kind of an independent person to give you advice might have been more helpful, might have helped me make more educated decisions at crucial times, or even at, when your child gets sick is when you panic. For the first time, they've got a cold or a cough or a, tummy bug or something. These are minor, but if at that time I had the thought of a helpline, 24/7 helpline, would have been amazing. It would have been amazing. At that time, I would frantically read through books or call my mom. We were on a different time zone, so it was not easy always to get hold of her. Of course, as a family, we all helped out and everybody mucked in. But like I said, I notice in India particularly, the grandparents tend to be very opinionated. And depending on the relationship between that mother and daughter, or that father and son, or mother and son, or previous generation, basically, depending on those dynamics, will definitely affect the dynamics towards the next generation. So it's about filtering out the good from the bad and deciding what you want to use and how you want to use it in your parental experience. I think there are, moms and dads out there doing amazing jobs. And I think everybody really tries to do the best they can from where they are and with what they have. I genuinely believe that my mom did that, and I genuinely believe that I've tried to do that. And I do think that largely, that is, when you decide to have a family, you do take the decision to sort of care for this other human being in the best way that you can. the world today, as you rightly said, is very different from that it was 30 years ago, just even 2 decades ago. And our children are growing up with many, many influences, bombarded, in fact, with, social media and many, many influences that we never had to deal with. I remember sort of the biggest thing for me was having to tell my kids my elder daughter to turn the light off at night from reading her books. The younger one, almost a decade later, it was the screen that was the problem. So there's a very dramatic change and a very fast-paced change. And I don't really even know if the education we're giving our children is setting them up and preparing them for the world ahead, because it's changing so fast that do we even really have a fix on what that world is going to look like? So I think the advice that I would always give is just to be there for your kids, to listen to them and to make them feel heard if they are bringing something to you. And you've made that commitment to be a parent, so parent your kids. Don't just don't put importance only on work. There has to be a balance. It is crucial to spend time with your children in their developmental years. 0 to 7 is when that person is kind of formed, their instinct, their how they will react to certain situations. It's all developed in those formative years. The rest is then they start learning things from others outside the family home. But essentially, I think to make a bond with your child and let them know that they have a safe place to be heard, that would be my advice.